Understanding 21st Century Learners, Chapter 2 Presentation. Learning is the development of new knowledge, skills, or attitudes as an individual interacts with information and in the environment. Learners in the 21st century need to be better educated to assume the challenges of continually evolving knowledge and skill requirements for the future. By creating seamless access to the global community and opening new avenues for addressing how and what to learn, technology and media have become an essential interface for learners as they move forward in their education. Characteristics of 21st century learners. The 21st century learner enters the classroom with a preconceived notion of how the world works. These learners expect to be engaged in active, hands-on experiences. They wish to be empowered to explore their ideas in their own ways, expecting the teacher to serve as a coach or facilitator, not as the person delivering the information. It is critical for teachers to help students develop inquiry approaches for gathering content facts, while also assisting them in a constructive conceptual frameworks within which to address the content, with the goals of facilitating their understanding and application of the knowledge. Continuing with the characteristics of the 21st century learner, the 21st century learner do not learn content in isolation. These students engage in multitasking and view information in a broad and network format. The learner of the 21st century also demonstrate a strong desire to learn from multiple formats beyond books, using multiple sources gathered via technology resources such as video, audio, and online sources. Continue, we have metacognition and motivation. Metacognition is multitasking within multiple formats, requires 21st century learners to take control of their learning outcomes. Metacognition is the term used to describe this ability to oversee one's personal learning and to understand how to regulate oneself in the learning process. Now, when it comes to motivation, motivation is the desire to see a task to completion. It's a critical metacognitive skill for all students to learn. It is an internal state that defines what people will do rather than what they can do. A helpful approach to understand student motivation is Keller's ARCS model. Keller describes 4 essential aspects of motivation that teachers can address when designing lessons: attention, relevance, confidence, and satisfaction. Attention, it develops lessons that your student perceive as interesting and worthy of their consideration. Relevance, ensure that the instruction is meaningful and meets students' learning needs and goals. Confidence, design lessons that build student expectation to succeed based on their own efforts. And satisfaction, address intrinsic and extrinsic rewards students receive from the instruction. Multiple intelligences. The concept of multiple intelligences was developed by Garner, who was dissatisfied with the concept of IQ and his unitary view of intelligence. Noting that not everyone has the same abilities, nor do they learn in the same way, he identified 9 aspects of intelligence. We have verbal linguistic language, we have logical, mathematical, scientific, quantitative, visual, spatial, imagining objects in space, navigating, bodily, kinesthetic, dancing, athletics, interpersonal, understanding other people, intrapersonal, understanding oneself, naturalist, relating to one's surrounding, and an existentialist, ability to reflect. Perceptual preferences and strengths. Students will vary as to which sensory gateways, visual, auditory, tactile, and kinesthetic, they prefer using and which they are especially adept at using. Research has shown that slower learners tend to prefer hands-on, active engagement involving tactile or kinesthetic experiences. However, dependence on the tactile and kinesthetic modalities decrease with maturity. Information processing habits. These information processing habits, or mind styles, are used to group learners according to concrete versus abstract and random versus sequential style. The grouping yields 4 categories: concrete sequential, concrete random, abstract sequential, and abstract random. Now, the concrete sequential learner prefers direct hands-on experience presented in a logical order. The concrete random learner learn towards a trial and error approach, quickly reaching conclusions from exploratory experiences. Abstract sequential learners decode verbal and symbolic messages adeptly, especially when presented in logical sequences. Abstract random learners are distinguished by their capacity to draw meaning from human mediated presentations. They respond to the tone and style of the speaker as well as the message. Psychological factors. Factors related to gender differences, health, and environmental conditions also influence learning. Boys and girls tend to respond differently to various school experiences. For example, boys tend to be more competitive and aggressive than girls and consequently respond better to competitive games, whereas girls often prefer learning activities that involve student engagement in discussions and sharing of ideas. If students' basic needs, such as hunger, temperature, noise, lighting, and time of day, are not addressed, they will be less able to mentally engage in meaningful learning activities. Learning style measurements. Teachers who have prescribed individual learning programs based on such analysis feel that they have practical value in improving academic achievement, attitude, and discipline. The intent in using information about a student's learning style is to adapt instruction to better meet the individual needs of learners. Examples of class adaptation include providing reading spaces with rugs and comfortable chairs, of arranging learning stations with subdued lighting that are somewhat private and quiet. You'll find that there are multiple strategies and an array of technologies and media that can help your student in their learning endeavors. Learning theories. How teachers view the role of technology and media in the classroom depends very much on their beliefs about how people learn. Over the past half-century, there have been several dominant theories of learning. Each has implications for instruction in general and for the use of technology and media in particular, such as the Bloom's taxonomy: creating, evaluating, analyzing, applying, understanding, and remembering. Behaviorist perspective. In the 1950s, B.F. Skinner, a psychologist at Harvard University and a proponent of behaviorism, conducted scientific studies of observable behavior. He was interested in voluntary behavior such as learning new skills. He demonstrated that reinforcing or rewarding desired responses could shape the behavior patterns of an organism. Unlike earlier learning research, Skinner's work was very logical and precise, leading directly to improved instruction and learning. Behaviorists refuse to speculate on what goes on internally when learning takes place. Although most would argue that in the 21st century, behavioral concepts are not necessarily applicable to the types of learners you are encountering in your classrooms, you may determine that some basic knowledge or skills require a behaviorist approach to instruction. Cognitive perspective. In the later half of the 21st century, cognitivists made new contributions to learning theory by creating models of how learners receive, process, and manipulate information. Cognitivism, based on the work of Swiss psychologist Jean Piaget, explores the mental processes individuals use in responding to their environment, that is, how people think, solve problems, and make decisions. For example, behaviorists simply state that practice strengthens the response to a stimulus. Cognitivists have a broader perception of learning that held by behaviorists. Students are less dependent on the guiding hand of the teacher and rely more on their own cognitive strategies in using available learning resources. Constructivist perspective. Constructivism is a movement that extends beyond the ideas of cognitivism, considering the engagement of students in meaningful experiences as the essence of experimental learning. They argue that students situate the learning experience within their own experience and that the goal of instruction is not to teach information, but to create conditions in which students can interpret information from their own understanding. Constructivists believe that learning occurs most effectively when students are engaging in authentic tasks that relate to a meaningful context. Social psychology perspective. Social psychology is another well-established approach to the study of instruction and learning. Social psychologists look at how the social organization of the classroom affects learning. Teachers need to develop an eclectic attitude towards the various schools of learning psychology. If we find that a particular learning situation is suited to a behaviorist approach, then we should use behaviorist techniques. When dealing with the 21st century learner in your classroom, consider which learning theory best applies to the particular type of learning task at hand. Information and instruction. Information is knowledge, facts, news, comments, and content. Information can be presented in a memo, in the classroom, in a textbook, or on the web. Learners should not be expected to be responsible for the retention or use of information they have only seen or heard. When it comes to instruction, instruction on the other hand refers to any intentional efforts to stimulate learning by the deliberate arrangement of experiences to help learners achieve or a desirable change in capability. Instruction is meant to lead to learning. Instruction is the arrangement of information and the environment to facilitate learning. By environment, we mean not only where instruction takes place, but also the strategies, technology, and media needed to convey information and guide its study. Principles of effective instruction. The following principles of effective instruction have evolved from a variety of sources. Assess prior knowledge, consider individual differences, state objectives, develop metacognitive skills, provide social interactions, incorporate realistic context, engage students in relevant practice, and offer frequent, timely, and constructive feedback. Principles of effective technology utilization. Teachers are expected to be competent in the use of technology in their teaching. This is especially true when working with 21st century learners and addressing the skills outlined for them, for which teachers not only need to use technology in their teaching, but also need to guide students in using those tools to enhance their learning. The National Education Technology Standard for Students, note in the following list, specifically outline expectations for students' use of technology to guide their learning. It was creativity and innovation, communication and collaboration, research and information fluency, critical thinking, problem solving and decision making, digital citizenship, technology operations and concepts. These 6 areas of competencies are also known as technology literacy skills. Principles of effective media utilization. We are continually learning from multiple sources of media that provide us with information and challenge our thinking. As users of these sources, we need media literacy skills to know how to access them, how to understand and analyze the content, and how to create new media message. The role is to guide students to use these media as sources for their learning in ways that are wise, safe, and productive. Principles of effective text utilization. Text is everywhere in students' learning experiences. Text materials include textbooks, fiction and nonfiction books, newspapers, booklets, computer screens, magazines, study guides, manuals, and worksheets, as well as word processed documents prepared by students and teachers. The ability to use text as a means to gather information or to communicate is known as text literacy. We have advantages, limitations, and integration of text utilization. The advantages: availability, flexibility, portability, and economical. The limitations: reading level, memorization, vocabulary, one-way presentation, curriculum determination, and cursory appraisal. For integration, teachers need to understand the best ways to use text to facilitate learning. Design good text-based materials involves a few basic elements: font choice, background and patterns arrangement, check and revise. Evaluation. As a teacher, you will want to consider all the types of text-based materials your students will be encountering in your classroom, as well as their individual reading abilities. As a teacher, you will want to be prepared to engage your students with technology and media to motivate them and help them to gain the types of knowledge and skills they need to be successful learners.